Welcome to National Parks Traveler, where we explore the national parks and the issues that involve them.
We can't escape history. We're born into a world full of it, and we're making it as we go from day to day. But how are we at preserving history? This is Kurt Repenchek, your host at the National Parks Traveler. There's been a lot of concern this year that the administration of President Donald Trump is altering, if not entirely trying to erase, history. But can that actually be done? The National Park Service, often called the nation's storyteller, has been interpreting history for more than a century, and some of that interpretation revolves around sites that have lost their physical structures over the decades. My guest today is Monica Rhodes, an internationally recognized leader, advisor, and influencer who has directed preservation activities in 46 states and completed projects in more than 100 national parks. Today, she advises and partners with cities, universities, and other institutions to revitalize and leverage historic sites and communities to ensure a vibrant future for these places. I'll be back in a minute with Monica to discuss history.
Washington's National Park Fund is the official philanthropic partner serving Mount Rainier, North Cascades, and Olympic National Parks. WNPF raises funds for scientific research, youth experiences, volunteer programs, and projects that preserve and protect these national parks in Washington state. Learn how you can help at WNPF.org. Acadia National Park is one of the 10 most popular national parks in the United States. It's also one of the smallest and most vulnerable. That's why Friends of Acadia exists. Friends of Acadia is an independent organization of passionate people inspiring those who love this magnificent park to make a real and lasting difference for Acadia. You can make a difference at friendsofacadia.org. The Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation is the primary nonprofit fundraising partner for the Blue Ridge Parkway. It is made up of people who have a deep love for this majestic road and want to ensure that its natural beauty and the experiences it offers endure for generations to come. Show your appreciation at brpfoundation.org. Smokey's Life. Full of stunning photography and thought-provoking reads, Smokey's Life Journal is a biannual magazine produced by Smokey's Life, formerly the Great Smoky Mountains Association. Members receive it free of charge each spring and fall, and it is available for purchase in retail stores throughout Great Smoky Mountains National Park and online at smokieslife.org. Support from readers and listeners like you make the National Parks Traveler possible every day of the year. If you enjoy the Traveler's content, please consider a donation at nationalparkstraveler.org.
Well, hi, Monica. Thanks for joining me here at the Traveler.
Hey, Kurt. Nice to be with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, no, it's great. I love history. I was a history minor in college, but I think the only reason that was because I took enough courses. But I do love history. I'm currently working on a 3-book series of the Revolutionary War, which is just fascinating. The author won a Pulitzer Prize for it, and I can understand why he did with the detail and the way he crafts the story. It's definitely a unique talent to be able to go back 250 years and make it feel like you're right there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I envy people like you and working in history on a daily basis. And, you know, it's been a while since we connected. Back in 2017, you were working with the National Trust for Historic Places, I believe. And we crossed paths when you were working with the Hope Cruise, which was a unique program. Can you explain that program a little bit, discuss it?
Yeah, sure. The National Trust for Historic Preservation, based in D.C., launched the Hope Crew program, which stands for the Hands-On Preservation Experience, Hope Crew, in 2014. And I was the founding director of that program, and that program was designed to bring young people, people of all backgrounds, into the preservation space, both as trades professionals, knowing that there are so many of these historic sites that have preservation plans, heavy on preservation plans, and light on the actual people to be able to do the work. And so that program was focused in on that, as well as engaging students, architecture students in preservation in the field. And most exciting, it was about giving regular folks like yourself who loved history an opportunity to be able to touch it, to clean headstones in Chalmette National Cemetery in New Orleans, or to repaint a baseball stadium. So it really was focused on lowering the barrier of entry into a field, into a movement that has a reputation of being very elitist, and also just not designed in a way where regular people can participate. So that was that program. It's still in existence today at the National Trust, run by some phenomenal folks there. And we were very proud and still proud of what that program was able to accomplish by getting young people and all people of different backgrounds into parks, into places, putting hammers in hands, and compensating folks to learn these skills.
Yeah. Now, back in 2017, the project you and the Hope crew were working on was in Grand Teton National Park. I believe you were working on the Crandall Studio, the historic Crandall Studio, a log structure that photographer Harrison Crandall had built decades ago, maybe almost a century ago, to showcase his photography and whatnot. And today, that building exists as the Jenny Lake Visitor Center. It gained some notoriety most recently when the House Natural Resources Committee came out to hold a field hearing on the Great American Outdoor Act a couple weeks ago. Now, the people that you engaged in that program, were they merely interested in learning skills, or were they really interested in history?
It was a bit of both. For that program, we were partnered with the Core Network, which is a national organization of youth and service conservation corps. So think of the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, of the 30s, right? They are direct descendants of that type of program. And they exist across the country. So we would partner with local youth corps to bring in young people who had I would say a variety of interests, right? So some of them were had a summer between freshman sophomore year in college, a photojournalist major, but they were interested in history and didn't have room in their schedule to put that in, or to fit that study in, but definitely wanted to have a chance to be out in parks and place, right? We also had people who did have backgrounds in natural resources and wanted to have a way to think about their work more comprehensively and understanding. One of my colleagues in the national parks would often say that there's no such thing as a cultural national park or a natural national park. It's a both and, right? And so we would find young people who were interested in both of those things, in being outside, a love of history, a love of public lands, and wanting to contribute to the country in some way. And then layer on the opportunity to swing a hammer, or to touch these resources that are so precious and dear to our nation. Certainly was not a hard sell for people to be able to participate on those. So it was a mix of both, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about the program, is that it created space for all types of folks to be able to enter and participate, regardless of background or even ability.
What about age?
Same. So the youngest Hope Crew member I can recall was about seven, five, about seven, and the oldest was about 75. Right. So those
So
volunteers,
it's not too late
yeah,
for me.
not too late. Volunteer activities. We had volunteers doing just about everything. And what I also appreciate about that program is that it brought so many people from different backgrounds together. And the one thing that we had was that, that Hope Crew shirt that you saw when we were talking about that project at Jenny Lake. But the unintended consequence of giving people an opportunity to touch history is that T-shirt, which was worn by people across the country that were all focused in on preserving historic sites and places. They were very proud to be connected to something that was bigger than themselves, right? It wasn't about the place or the story that they were preserving, which they were certainly excited about, but having this human connection across geographic boundaries, and being able to say that they were a part of something with someone that did not look like them or were not from the same location as them, was what really got people excited about it, and still very proud of all of those connections that were able to be made because of that.
What is it about history that fascinates people? I mean, why is it important?
That's a very good question, Kurt. And my answer to that is that when we think about history, we are really talking about identity. Right? And history isn't taught in that way, right? When I was a history major, you were a minor, when we were in school, of course, learning microfiche and in the stacks, but you had to like memorize dates and places, and like it was just a regurgitation. What preservation and historic places and national parks in particular do is they activate those and they bring those places to life, right? Like, when I was growing up, one of my first national parks, even though I'm from Texas, I went to the National Mall as my first experience, right? And then Arlington Cemetery up the way from that. And being able to see the places and the people that I was reading about brought it to life in a different type of way. It also it empowered me in some certain sense to be able to understand who I was within context of these folks who had lived incredible lives that I was entering into, and I was able to be in these spaces that they once walked in, and the houses that they walked in, and streets that they walked down, right? And so it helps to shape identity, and it also creates a national identity. So if we're talking about the National Mall, there's a reason why millions of people from across the world, around the world, come to see the Washington Monument. They go to the mall, they go see the memorials because it says something about who we are and what we value as a nation and whose stories do we value, like who's in that and who's out of that, right? History and places in particular help us and remind us of who we are, who we've been, but I would say even more importantly, they are guardrails or in some ways a North Star, I'll say, for who we can be, right?
Is there good history and bad history?
No, no. There's history, right? There's truth, there's fact, there's also fiction. I think there's interpretation of those things. I think history serves as a way, a way for us to remember, and as lessons learned on what we should not repeat. But I don't see history in and of itself as a bad thing, or historical figures as these bad people. These are people who made decisions, and decisions that we are still living with in some sense. But we, as people who are alive today, have the ability to determine and decide what will we do with those legacies that we have inherited.
Present day, there's a lot of questions about history. The administration, as I'm sure you're aware, has asked people who go to the national parks to point out placards and interpretive messaging that might disparage people, both those living today and those who lived a century or two ago. How does that work? How does the community of historians across the country come to terms with that approach to viewing history? That it can only be good. We don't want to talk about the bad stuff.
Well, I'll speak for me. a trained preservationist and a historian. So, from my personal opinion, I think Americans are brave enough and strong enough to be able to deal and grapple with the things that don't put us necessarily in the best light, right? Even if we look at our own personal stories, there are things that we, certain things that we've done an incredible job with, and certain things that we rather not know, everyone know about, right? It's a part of the human experience, and I think to minimize or in some way try to erase the complexity and the layered histories that we all are exist in, I think it does a disservice to what our nation has been and who we are. And one of the things that I think is also concerning, in addition to the this political polarization, is also thinking about this public process around what does it take to actually build a national history and a national identity. It takes groups of people to decide that this is what it is, right? So this is why national parks have that public comment process, so we can hear these different ideas coming together and we shape them in a way that makes sense for who we want to be and the lessons that we want to and the values we want to transmit to the next generation, right? We make decisions about these things. So by and large, we should not be afraid to have these hard conversations, because we are a nation that also has had hard and troubling and challenging moments. And the more that we can face those and be honest and deliberate about identifying what lessons for us as a nation are important for us to always remember, I think the better off we'll be in not repeating those things in the next generation or even the one that we're currently in.
There is a group of librarians at the University of Minnesota who earlier this summer started a campaign called Save Our Signs, and it was focused on the national parks. And they encouraged park visitors to take pictures of interpretive placards, Park Service signs, anything they thought was important that we hold on to. I talked to one of the members behind this drive last week, and they had almost 5,000 images that they had collected, and they're going to catalog them and make a searchable database. There's other groups out there that have combed the internet, mainly federal agencies, to try and capture information before it disappears. Is there a realistic concern that history is being erased, that we're going to forget about some segments? I mean, there was a big uproar with how the Stonewall National Monument in New York City was being altered, so to speak, to we're gonna make believe transgender people don't exist, that lesbians don't exist. That is there a concern that we're going to forget history?
I don't have that concern. I think that there is history that lives in places, and I also think history lives within us, right? Like your example of the librarians, and I think that is a phenomenal example of how everyday people can take action and do something to ensure that stories are not forgotten, right? I think it's important to remember that there's agency that we have within ourselves as a nation, as people, individuals. That some of these park sites that we now think of, like a Stonewall or Stones River National Cemetery, those places have not always been national parks. Those places have not always had federal funding, have not always had preservation protection. There are ways in which, particularly in this moment, that we can understand that there is power that we have as people to do something about the action that's happening right now. I would also say that in addition to those places, not having the federal funding, they were also stewarded and protected by regular folks. And parks are often created, not just by national monuments and through acts of Congress, but it moves through a way and moves through regular people who have banded together to say, this place is important, we value this place, we want to protect this place. And eventually it becomes a federal site, but it takes a while to get there, right? So I don't want to skip over the work that normal, regular people do and have done throughout the history of this nation to protect history, and also understand that that history has not always been embedded in our national identity, our stories that we tell ourselves. So there's stories that are within us. I would also say that the erasure is something that it's going to sound old here, but these things don't last always, right? There's always a response to something. And so while we are in this moment now, and navigating this moment now, and across the political spectrum, there are people who are concerned about this, right? I'm hearing, friends and colleagues across the on both sides, and I will say that there is something that there is some type of way that we can both be honest about the fact that all the history is not already in these places, that there are still chapters that are missing, and that there, even while we thought things were good, there was still work to do. What this moment then also helps us, sheds a light on, is that there were gaps in what we thought that we were taking for granted, right? That there were things that we thought that were settled. There were conversations in places that we probably, rested on our laurels and said, these are, this is solved and resolved, and we moved on to the next thing. And I think, what's important, and I say the power of history, is that it reveals, not only who we are, but where we stand. And we both know that that is a function of where we sit, right? So that is, to me, I'm answering your question in a long type of way here. But I am not overly concerned with the erasure of things. I'm more concerned with, after this, the work that comes afterwards, right? That is where my focus is, as it relates to navigating through now.
Sure. And so it's safe to say that regardless of what might be going on in Washington these days, there is still that drive down below across the country of people who want to preserve and interpret history.
Yeah, it's there. And I also say, Kurt, that, preservation is, in my estimation, one of the most democratic things that we can do as groups of people, right? Like no one person creates a national park or a national site. It's groups of folks through, decades deciding that this story, this place is worthy of something. And then that happens at the local level, and then it moves all the way up. So you have all of these people and funders and nonprofits and individuals and government agencies like touching these things to in order for it to get to a federally recognized site. So that's what I'm leaning on. Is like we create this history. We have agency here, right? Uh, we could do big things because we've always done big things, and that is the power of this moment. Is revealing some things about us. Is revealing some things, some conversations that we probably have taken for granted. But I see that as a way to galvanize us as groups of folks to really be even more proactive about the stories and places and people that need to be a part and enshrined as a part of our national identity.
This is Kurt Repenchak with the National Parks Traveler. We're talking today with Monica Rhodes, an internationally recognized leader, advisor, and influencer in the role of historic preservation activities. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. The National Parks Traveler this year has tracked rapid-fire upheaval across the national park system as the Trump administration plies its government-shrinking blitz. We'll continue illuminating these dramatic changes for our readers and listeners, but in the coming months, the Traveler also will be taking a deep dive into crucial questions facing the natural world in parks across the country. We'll probe the rainforest's greenery and explore what's at risk in Atlantic Ocean depths. We'll walk across prairie grasses to glimpse what an enormous swath of North America once looked like, back when it nourished bison, western meadowlark, big bluestem grasses, and more. Are they relics of the past, or can they rebound? What wildlife have we lost, and what might we lose in the coming decades? If a coral reef dies, what becomes of the vast marine life that relies upon it for survival? Does the loss of one species of pine tree matter? If grizzly bears, birds, and squirrels turn to it for food, it does, right? Over the next 10 months, the Traveler's team will delve into the park system's forests, oceans, and plains in search for answers. In the Florida Reef, we'll dive to gauge the future of staghorn and elkhorn corals. In Haleakala National Park, we'll hike into the tropical forest and arid alpine desert to check on both the silvery-haired silver swords, a plant threatened with extinction, and the honeycreeper bird species, even closer to vanishing. We'll check in on bat species that call Mammoth Cave National Park and Great Smoky Mountains National Park home. We'll search for northern spotted owls and follow efforts to help abalone populations rebound. The stories of species in our national parks are tales of both success and failure, but all are threads in the fabric of the park system. They need to be illuminated to show what species the parks can nurture if they have support, and what will be lost if no one cares. We will bring them to you in words, photographs, videos, and conversations. Our series won't be a one-and-done effort, but a starting point for understanding what's at risk in the natural world around us. We hope you share our interest in these crucial issues and will help support our work with a donation. The Curtis and Edith Munson Foundation has agreed to match your donations dollar for dollar up to $15,000. Your help in reaching this goal is invaluable. Can we count on your support? You can find a donate button on our homepage at nationalparkstraveler.org. For The Traveler, this is Kurt Repenchek. So, Monica, you worked for the National Trust for Historic Preservation. You worked for the National Park Foundation. You're currently running your own operation, the Rhodes Heritage Group. What do you guys do?
Yeah, the Rhodes Heritage Group is a cultural heritage strategy firm, and we work with communities and governments to help infuse and think about how do we bring the past into the future, right? So we're kind of turning preservation on its head and not doing preservation for preservation's sake. But it's realizing that there's so much embedded in the narratives that we think only belong in a museum or in a book. And we are a design firm. So we're thinking about, well, how does this then show up on the landscape? How do people interact and engage with this, right? As I was developing the company, I thought really deeply about what has been the core of my professional journey, and it has been how do I ensure, like my professional responsibility that I have, to put as many people in conversation with the past as a way for them not to just visit, but to be thoughtful about what does this moment mean? What does this place mean? Where am I within the context of all that came before me? But what comes after me, right? And so we work across the country with cities, landscape architecture firms, real estate development firms, thinking about what is the future of the past.
Interesting turn of the phrase. I'm sure you could spend all your time working in the national park system. I mean, there is so much history there that needs to be preserved. I mean, you worked at the Grand Teton on the Jenny Lake Visitor Center, and you mentioned the CCC, and across the country there are so many CCC creations that could use some preservation, I'm sure. I don't want to put you on the spot, but is the Park Service capable of dealing with those preservation needs and those interpretation needs?
The national park system is in a pivotal moment, right? So there has always been a challenge with the all of the historic resources, the resources to manage in the park system. When I was doing the Hope Crew program, there was billions of dollars in deferred maintenance backlog, which is why we worked as a program so much on public lands is to help address that deferred maintenance backlog and being a part of the effort through the Great American Outdoors Act and advocating for its passage in 2020, was a part of acknowledging the support that the national park system needs or needed in order to function. I will also say, as someone who's worked across over 100 national parks, is that I have a lot of friends and colleagues in the green and gray, and it is rare. I can probably count on one hand that I've encountered a National Park Service ranger employee that is only doing one job. And this was 10 years ago, right? So it's usually, cultural resource manager, as well as communications person or public information officer. So people were doubling and tripling up. So it was already challenging, and having funding, cut doesn't make that job any easier. What I can say though is one of the things that I most admire about our national park system are the committed staff members, professionals who, even in spite of all that continues to be thrown their way, that they are navigating incredibly well. Uh, they are still committed to preserving the nation's the nation's story, the nation's identity, and it is challenging, right? There's no way around it. To be quite frank, so I think if the Park Service was funded at the appropriate levels, there would absolutely be no doubt in my mind of its ability as an agency to manage the resources that it is federally responsible to manage and steward.
It's been said that the National Park Service is the nation's storyteller, and yet I don't think the Park Service has enough storytellers. I've been running the Traveler for 20 years now, and throughout those 20 years, there's been a lament from historians in the agency that there aren't enough historians in the agency. You start to think that the Blue Ridge Parkway, which was designed by a landscape architect, does not have a landscape architect on staff. That places like Mount Rainier does not have a volcanologist on staff. I'm not sure if the Grand Canyon has an archaeologist on staff. But all these places have such rich history that needs to be interpreted and presented to the public so we can consume it, so we can learn more about these places, and as you said earlier, so we can learn more about ourselves. And I'm not sure how you rectify that situation. I mean, it's not new. I mean, it's not just this administration. Congresses going back 20 years have not funded the Park Service properly, and so I don't know what the answer is. Do you rely more on private historians, so to speak? I know seasonal employees of the Park Service come from all walks of life, and there's the talk of contracting things out, and you have a lot of concessionaires or commercial use authorization organizations that come into the parks. Is there a dearth of historic interpretation in the parks from your perspective?
Yeah, I'll say too, where the opportunity is, one of the underestimated resources in our nation is embedded within our young people. It's embodied in our within our young people. Working with that Hope Crew program, I saw firsthand just how many people, and when I say youth, that at the time it was anyone under the age of 35, how many people were excited about the opportunity just to be able to do something because most people had never been asked or given the opportunity, right? With the saying, there's talent is equally distributed, but opportunity is not. Their public lands are all around us, but the opportunity for people to really connect with them and have an impact on them, those moments, those opportunities are far and few between. And that was one of the great things about that program, was being able to bring in volunteers as well as paying young people to be able to learn the skills that the Park Service so desperately needed at the time and still to this day, which that's preservation, historic preservation resource management, right? Stewarding these spaces, actually doing the rehabilitation, the repair, the restoration of historic structures. So you're right, that has been a very long and, in my estimation, an unnecessary, complicated issue when you have so many people who want to contribute and a very narrow pathway to get into uniform or to be a national park employee. So it's my hope that in the very near future that there is some type of reform that happens that really creates more pathways or on ramps for people to be able to enter the agency, because there's certainly no lack of interest here. I very rarely, I actually can't think of one example where, when I said what the project was there not a light that comes on in someone's eye or a smile that comes across their face, that they're able to actually be able to touch history or be in such an iconic place. It hasn't happened in my career, and I've worked with many people. And so that to me is an untapped resource that I'm hoping that the nation will realize soon, that we should be making some investments in getting people who want to be in the agency in there and to help support all the resource management needs that NPS has.
Yeah, back in 2016 with the centennial of the National Park Service, there was a whole lot of interest in the National Park Service and being a ranger and how can we improve the agency. And I worry a little bit that we've forgotten that fervor about what a great organization the National Park Service is and should be, and how the parks should really shine out there. And I think we need a national reminder from time to time, and we're probably going to get one next year with the celebration of the 250th anniversary of the United States. But it'd be nice to see something on an annual basis to invigorate our parks and the Park Service. Let's talk historic preservation. In the news recently, you probably heard the Grand Canyon Lodge burned down. It was engulfed by the Dragon Bravo fire. Interesting name for a fire. And actually, it was the second Grand Canyon Lodge on the north rim of Grand Canyon National Park. The first lodge burned down as well. That was a result of a kitchen fire. This one, of course, was a wildfire sparked by lightning. There's been some debate, not a lot, over whether the lodge should be rebuilt. I know Interior Department officials say it should be rebuilt. It's going to be a while, I'm sure, before we hear more detailed conversations about what it will look like or what it should look like. Any thoughts on that?
I do. I'm often asked, like, what is the future of preservation, right? And some people say technology, but I'm also thinking about the reality of our changing environment, right? Our changing climate, and how it has impacted and will continue to impact these irreplaceable buildings, places. I mean, we thinking about, down at near Colonial National Park and sea level rise, right? Or we're thinking about Annapolis and sea level rise, or we're thinking about the fires out west. Like you just name it. It's happening on all fronts. And to me, the question that we should all be asking as a nation is how are we going to manage the places that both hold our stories and also places that we we visit to remind us of who we are, right? Because they are under threat, and I don't have the answer for what that looks like. Where there is not a coordinated effort around what are we going to do around with these historic sites and climate action, right? There is certainly a national effort where preservationists have gotten together to come up with a strategy on how to provide some climate resources related to managing historic places. But that is operating in a silo in some sorts, and they're doing an excellent job, I'll say, of stretching the boundaries and talking to other types of design fields and people. But where is the federal response to all of that? Right. I know where is the state and local coordinated response to that? That's also working with practitioners and scholars to have a comprehensive approach to what are we going to do as a nation as we continue to be impacted by these wildfires and hurricanes and tornadoes and all of these things that are just only going to increase and be more severe over time. So there, as we were talking about there being a national reminder of the importance of parks every year, I also think there should be this national convening that brings people outside of their disciplinary silos or their organizational silos to be in discussion with each other about what action going to take so we can be in offense instead of a reactionary mode to when the next tragedy happens.
Yeah. I think we're seeing it on a piecemeal basis or around the park system. Different efforts to analyze how the changing climate is affecting historic properties and structures. But going back to the Grand Canyon Lodge, I'm wondering, should it be rebuilt as a replica? I mean, you take the Old Faithful Inn in Yellowstone National Park, and it's such a magnificent building. And you walk through it, and you run your hands across the polished staircase railings that are polished by millions and millions of hands over the century. And the tree branches that they integrated into the staircases and the balconies. It's just a stunning facility. And if that burned down, I'm sure there'd be a clamoring for, we want to rebuild it just the way it was, so we can hold on to those memories. And I'm just wondering if they can do that with the Grand Canyon Lodge and what type of challenges they would face. I mean, certainly they could take climate change more into consideration with some of the building materials, I'm sure. But I think it would be a shame if they rebuilt it as a totally different structure. I mean, I love parkitecture, as they called it. Gilbert Stanley Underwood, who went through the park system in the early 1900s and designed beautiful facilities like the Zion Lodge and the Bryce Canyon Lodge. And I think he designed the Grand Canyon Lodge. And then he went and designed the Jackson Lake Lodge, which I just think is so ugly, made out of concrete. It's not going to burn. But there are people who have been going to the North Rim of Grand Canyon for generations, and they hold on to these memories of what that lodge looked like and felt like. And I'm sure they want it to be the same if it is rebuilt. Can that be done?
Yeah, that's certainly a way for there to have that lodge be built based on drawings and the archival design documents associated with the lodge. I, I am agnostic on that. What I am most concerned as a preservationist is how do we preserve those buildings and places that are still with us, and what do we do and how do we manage those? And there's so much in the national park system to be able to manage, right? And we talked about the Great American Outdoors Act a few seconds ago. Thinking about the $6 million that GOA, those funds went to help a place like Saratoga National Historical Park, right? Upgrade and make their systems more accessible, their routes, their parking areas, their trailheads, their walkways, with the visitor experience. I was just up that way last weekend. I did a fly fishing lesson. We're in Manchester, Vermont, and went over to Saratoga to see some of that. And to me, like that is the beauty of the park system. Walking up and seeing a smaller replica of a cabin, so that folks who were visually impaired or low vision could be able to have a tactile experience, to be able to touch a small replica, to get a sense of what is this cabin, that's in front of them, right? That is the innovation, and what I am excited about in terms of the possibility that NPS has to make history more accessible to as many people as possible.
That's Monica Rhodes. She was a 2023 Rome Prize Fellow in Historic Preservation and Conservation at the American Academy in Rome, and a 2022 Loeb Fellow at Harvard University. Monica, it's been a pleasure talking with you today and catching up on historic preservation. And they call it history, but it's alive and well today.
Thank you, Kurt. It's been a pleasure.
That's our show. I hope you found it interesting. Keep on the lookout for history as you tour the national park system. It exists everywhere, sometimes in the physical form of a fort or cabin, other times only in spirit, but it's a rich spirit. For The Traveler, this is Kurt Repenchek. See you in the parks.
The composers and musicians at Orange Tree Productions have created a unique collection known as the National Park Series that has grown to include more than 30 CD titles. Composed against the backdrop of a park's sounds of nature, these musical scores will connect you with these beautiful places and take you there, at least in your mind. This collection is the #1 selling National Park audio series in the world and provides the background music for National Parks Travelers podcasts. Visit them at orangetreeproductions.com. Editing and production work for the National Parks Traveler podcast is done by Splitbeard Productions. You can learn more about us at splitbeardproductions.com. National Parks Traveler is a 501c3 nonprofit media organization that provides daily editorial coverage of national parks and protected areas. Traveler's coverage is made possible by reader and listener donations. Visit us at nationalparkstraveler.org.